always move things. It just is
Good evening, everyone. It is Tuesday, December 3rd. It is 7:30, and we are going to begin our regularly scheduled city council meeting. We're going to start by standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we're going to remain standing as words of inspiration will be given by Councilmember Anderson tonight. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Councilmember Anderson, welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back. Let's bow our heads. Lord God, we thank you for this day and the opportunities it presents. We ask you to lead us and guide us in all things, and we thank you for all things. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. Let's assume I already called the meeting to order, and let's just do it again for fun. Meeting called to order. Michelle, may we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Anderson,
Here.
Councilmember Binkowski,
Yes, here.
Mayor Milan,
I'm here.
Mayor Pro Tem Moffett,
Present.
Councilmember Shepherd. Here.
We are all here, present and accounted for. May I have an approval of the agenda?
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve tonight's agenda for Tuesday, December 3rd, 2024, as presented.
Support. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Anderson,
Yes.
Councilmember Binkowski,
Yes.
Mayor Milan,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Moffett,
Yes.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Yes.
Thank you. We have approved our agenda. We'll move on to public comment. If anyone's noticed, we have this fancy new clock hanging over Nick's head, and it will keep track of a 3-minute time limit. If anyone would like to speak right now for public comment for items that are on the agenda, we will allow you to be the very first person to utilize the clock. And our test is to see if you can get to the 3-minute mark so we can test it out. Anybody up for that? Okay, anyone up for it under normal rules? Okay, then we do have someone.
Shar Larson with the Chamber. I just had an opportunity recently, shame on me for not doing it sooner, to look at the information about the Clawson Flats. I can't tell you how excited I was to see the windows, the design, and everything. As a matter of fact, I live in Troy. I built my house 30 years ago. But you know, when I go home, if I go in the garage, nobody knows if I'm alive or dead. And I was so excited. I saw all these windows. I thought I could live next to somebody and people would know I'm there. Somebody jokingly said, you'll be at Burger Bar every day. But I really think it's a great design. I understand there's some concerns about density and things like that. I don't know if that could be worked around, but I think it's so important for the city, the money that it will bring, the spendable money that the people will bring, and they'll bring other people to Clawson. I don't have an answer on the parking. I don't have an answer on how much traffic. I do understand there was a traffic study, but I think it's a beautiful place. And I even told them I'll probably be the first one to move in there. I mean, I'm really excited about this. The blight of the bank is awful, and it doesn't bring anything to Clawson. And we're continuing to grow. I mean, whether it be on Rochester Road, the new marble or stone place, for tile, and just every place. It's just a wonderful thing to see. So I hope it can be worked so that this can go ahead, regardless of any things that might have to work things out or however it will happen. I'm not on that end, but I just wanted to say I was very impressed. And I think it's just a big plus for Clawson.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I am Mary Liz Curtin from Leon Lulu and Three Cats, and I am here to also offer my support for the Clawson Flats. I think it is a stunning development, be fabulous for downtown. I would be more than happy to see the drive-through from the PNC drive on by and be done with it. I'm thrilled with the use, I'm thrilled with the people coming to the city, and I hope that this body will actually help to make it happen. And I also, as the former chair of the DDA, would like to remind you that the DDA did unanimously vote to support this proposal last May, and I certainly hope that it will go through. And that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Okay, then we'll close public comment and move on to item number 7, which is proclamations and presentations. And as we have no proclamations or presentations this evening, we'll move on to item number 8, which is consideration of approving the following consent agenda. Item A would be minutes of the regular city council meeting held Tuesday, November 19th, 2024. And item B, list of bills in the amount of $1,204,279.98.
So moved.
Thank you.
Support.
Thanks. Roll call, please.
Madam Mayor, I think I'm sorry, I think on the minutes here, there might be an issue. Considering the first reading of an ordinance to amend the, we resolved to move to deny the first reading of the ordinance, and then the minutes say we all voted nay, but I think we all voted aye to deny, so this is backwards. Agenda item 90.
Do you recall that?
Yes, it was correct. I believe you are correct, Mr. Binkowski.
Well, maybe the easiest way to do it is just to move to remove the minutes from the consent agenda, then bring them back next time we can do them.
Or you can approve them as amended, as you've stated, so.
Okay, I'll move to amend the minutes, item 9.e, to show ayes for all the council members who are present.
Support.
Okay, anything else? Then roll call, please, Michelle.
Councilmember Binkowski,
Yes.
Mayor Milan,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Moffett,
Yes.
Councilmember Shepherd,
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson.
Yes.
Okay, we've approved our consent agenda. We'll move on to item number 9, which is.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, we didn't approve the
Oh,
consent
sorry,
agenda.
you're right. We did not approve the consent agenda. We approved it with modifications. Thank you.
So we need another roll call for the second motion.
For the main motion.
Sorry. Why are you guys making this difficult? You could have just done it in one, it would have been done, but no. So another roll call, please. For,
Approving the consent agenda is amended.
right, thank you.
Councilmember Binkowski,
Yes.
Mayor Milan,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Moffett,
Yes.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson.
Yes.
Okay, we just approved the consent agenda as amended. Moving on now to item 9A, under new business, we have a public hearing in consideration of approving the 2025 through 2029 Parks and Recreation Master Plan for the city of Clawson.
Madam Mayor, I move the 2025-2029 Parks and Recreation Master Plan for the city of Clawson be approved as presented.
Support.
Mr. Aker?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Parks and Recreation Master Plan expired in 2022. The administration and council intentionally budgeted to address our need to update the master plan in this fiscal year's budget. The 2025-2029 Parks and Recreation Master Plan was prepared with the assistance of Carlisle Wortman, Parks and Recreation board members, active involvement of the city, and with citizen input. Part of the process is to host a public hearing as posted for this evening. We thank all those who have assisted with the Parks and Recreation Master Plan update, and it is the administration's recommendation that to approve the 2025-2029 Parks and Recreation Master Plan for the city of Clawson. Parks and Recreation Director Scott Jennings is present for the presentation and for questions. Mayor Milan shall open a public hearing after Director Jennings' presentation.
Director Jennings, are you ready for your presentation? Welcome.
Yes, Your Honor. Madam Mayor. We also have with us Ben Carlisle of Carlisle Wortman fame, and the chair of our Recreation Advisory Board, Melissa Prowse, who also works for Oakland County Parks and Recreation, and our Assistant Director, Lisa Ball. So I believe you had this presentation in your packets, but we will go through it. It talks about what the purpose of a master plan is. It's a kind of an optimistic guide for what the future might be for the Recreation and Senior Services Department. And it's required by the Michigan DNR to be able to apply for 3 different types of grants. So we have not been able to even apply for these grants for the last couple of years. And this gets us back in the game for those. And as we look at the needs of our recreation center and our parks, getting grant money certainly would be a great help to allow us to do more than we can do on our own. So the planning process involved taking an inventory of our parks and the status of them, an ADA analysis. We met with Chris from Carlisle Wortman and put together an online survey that was available for residents June, July, and August. Then it was available online and in person. We had 360 some people respond. A lot of them were hard copies from some of our seniors who come into the center a lot but aren't online much. So we then compiled those and put together the draft plan and reviewed that and made a couple tweaks to it. And now it's been online for public review since October 10th, and that ends today. And we put together kind of a target for each of the facilities and parks. Some of the key findings: 99% of the residents identified maintenance as very important or important. Ensuring that our parks are safe and accessible is 93%, and adding new or updated features at existing parks with 87%. So those were some of our highest scores on anything on the survey. Residents are generally happy with the parks. City Park received the highest scores. People are interested in aquatic facilities, aren't we all? And continuing some more key findings, a majority of the residents had not participated in our recreation programming, whether they spend time in the parks or not. 88% said that special events and festivals were important or very important, to nobody's surprise. And they asked for more shows, concerts, exercise, fitness classes. So Hunter Community Center received the lowest scores among our park properties. Just under 50% felt 46.1 felt that the city should develop a new center. 46.7% said they would need more information, and 83.7% of our residents that took the survey said that we should perform a feasibility study to evaluate the construction of a new center. So we talked about trails. There's definitely some interest expressed in having new or more accessible trails, paved pathways that people with disabilities are able to traverse more easily. There are several park-specific recommendations that are in detail in the plan. And again, the plan is aspirational. We're not expecting everything that's in this plan is going to happen in the next 5 years. I mean, we've been to budget meetings. We know that this is best case scenario. But it gives us a plan, it gives us a guideline, and it allows us, again, to apply for those potential grants, most of which are typically set up with matching requirements. And for some of them, the higher percent of match we have, the better score we get on that category. So they're, up to 25%, 26 to 50% is another category, and so on. So Clawson City Park is the favorite park. It's the one that people use the most, and it's one that they rated the highest. There were several specific things that people seem to be interested. We are looking at security cameras, which was one of the things on here. That's a significant need. We talked about potentially adding a couple of amenities there, long range, maybe replacing some of the aging play structures, basketball courts, or something that a lot of people ask for that we don't have in the parks currently. There are a couple of hoops that neighbors generously put up at Parkland, but we don't have our own basketball courts available for anybody in town. So the Hunter Center, again, the biggest recommendation was that we do a feasibility study, which is more of a long-range plan. In the short term, there are a lot of things that were recommended in the study that was done and published last year in November about the current issues of the current facility. So hopefully we can address some of those issues, including playground and accessibility. And we did just get the parking lot spray patch last week, and it's much better. So sometimes those small things can be very helpful with an aging facility. At Grant Park, accessible walkways again. We're very interested in the condition of our bleachers there and at other parks. Some of them you might remember from when you were kids, because they've been here that long. The potential addition of another pavilion. Every summer weekend day, the pavilion at City Park is rented out. So there's been interest expressed in another pavilion, and that might be a great place for it since there's already water and a restroom facility there. The tennis courts there are a little rough. We only put one net up this year because the other court is not in great shape. We'd love to upgrade that and add pickleball lines and tennis lines to it, and resurface that and address the other issues in that park, including potentially making it accessible. We have a great parking lot there and a great restroom facility, and those tennis courts could be accessible as well with very little additional paving. Parkland, Memorial, and Rotary Parks are obviously smaller, but they have some areas that could be tweaked and updated. But for those of you that live near Parkland, you know that we've been trying to get the one structure fixed for quite some time, as the tube slide is beyond its usable life, and hopefully the new part will be on soon. So the next steps, the public hearing tonight, any additions or changes or deletions that City Council wants to make, and then in January, a signed resolution from the council, and it gets filed with the state February 1st. And then grant applications are, for the first round, are due April 1st. So that's the first chance we have to apply for the grants that this opens us up for.
Great. So should we open up the public hearing? We'll do that. I'm going to open up the public hearing. If anyone would like to come forward and ask any questions or have any comments about this presentation, we welcome you. Seeing no one move because they're afraid of the clock, I will close the public hearing and allow for council comments if council has any comments they'd like to make. Yes, sir?
Mr. Jennings, I'm curious if there was any feedback about a dog park in any of the surveys, and I know we've, as council members, I think all of us have received an email or two about, provisions for a dog park.
Sure. A dog park was one of the things that came up, I think, sixth on one of the parts of the survey with 20-some% interest expressed. And we have been, in response to that, we've been looking at the potential for the opportunity to use the existing dog parks that are in the area, similar to how we look at maybe aquatic facilities that are close by, that maybe we can get a joint use agreement with a nearby or adjoining city potentially. That's one of the things that we looked at. There are 3 dog parks in fairly close proximity to Clawson. One in Troy, one in Royal Oak, and one in, I think it's Madison Heights? Yeah, the Oakland County one, which is free to residents now that their ballot initiative passed.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else?
The diamond at Grant. So is that, I know there's a tree out in the outfield. I think that's dead. Has there been discussion about removing that, or has it been removed? And does that fall under them, or how does that?
Honestly, council member, that is something I'm going to have to go back and revisit. I remember us talking about that, especially with CYBSL and the concern for the consolidation of space and diamonds and whatnot. And I think that is an opportunity that still exists out there that needs to be further explored.
Okay, I mean, because that used to be a diamond at some point. There are benches there that abut literally against the back fence of the property that on the south side. I think it needs to be, from what it looked like, that the proposal was putting in some stands near there, moving it out a little bit. I think that home plate is still there. Long ago, we used it for kickball practice, and there was a legitimate field at some point, but that's been 10 years ago now. But I'd like to try and see that is a part of what was expressed in the Grant Park proposal, right?
Right, and that's, again, aspirationally, I want to see a ball diamond in that spot again, and we're hoping that's down the road.
Okay.
That one of the problems with Grant is definitely the drainage, which I realize you guys have never heard anybody talk about drainage issues in Clawson, but there's a spot out there near the trees, between like the trees and the parking and the tennis, kind of in that central area, that we would hopefully address that at some point as well with something.
What's your water feature? You've been looking for a water feature. There you go.
Well, that's what we tell people when they call. No, it's not. But yeah, the best case scenario, we put a ball diamond back in there and have pickleball and a trail that's accessible and a pavilion.
One of there's a number of parks in the area that are not part of Clawson that were listed. One of the parks that always comes to mind, because my family tends to play pickleball, is at Redwood Park, which is at the end of Key West. And they do have a ball diamond there, they have play area, and they have pickleball courts. But it's a kind of an isolated area for the city of Troy that you actually have to go through basically Madison Heights or Royal Oak for Troy residents or us in order to get to that park. Has there been any thought as far as trying to use that facility in case we are short of some facilities?
Not that I'm aware of. But the that same idea of using facilities that are nearby. And you see in the survey data that we also, as part of the inventory, don't just look at what's physically within Clawson, but also county parks, metro parks, state parks, and other adjacent or nearby communities. So that those count as you look at the national standards for the availability of certain amenities, golf courses.
Anyone else? It was a great presentation. It was easy to read. It looked great. So whoever did that, good job. The
Carlisle
information
Wortman did
It was really
the
very
presentation.
nice. Yeah.
And Chris, who's sick tonight and can't be here, but
Well,
he did a great job.
yeah, thank you. Okay, well, thank you very much for your presentation. May we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Milan,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Moffett,
Yes.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson,
Yes.
Councilmember Binkowski.
Yes.
Thank you. We have just approved our 2025 through 2029 Parks and Recreation Master Plan. And we move on to the next item, which is item 9B, which is consideration of the planned unit development for 150 North Main Street and 36 Lincoln.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve the proposed planned unit development for 150 North Main and 36 Lincoln, subject to the preparation of a planned unit development agreement.
Support.
Thank you. Mr. Stepanitz?
One of them. Thank you, Mayor Milan. So before we kick off with the presentation from Joe from Giffords Webster and the applicant, I just wanted to provide some historical context as to how we got to where we are today. So on October 3rd, 2023, the applicants presented and were approved for a PA 210 Commercial Rehabilitation District and Certificate. As part of that application, the applicants indicated that their ideal proposed development would aim to incorporate approximately 68 units over 3 stories with a mix of studio, 1-bedroom, and 2-bedroom units with approximately 75 on- and off-street service parking spaces. Now, this was stated before they went through the planning stage with the Planning Commission, and the project scale and scope has been further refined during that process. On December 12th, 2023, the Planning Commission was presented with a preliminary plan unit development application to determine if the proposed project meets the qualification eligibility criteria that is set forth in the plan unit development ordinance. The eligibility criteria consist of the following: recognizable and substantial benefit. The planned unit development shall achieve a higher quality of development than would otherwise be achieved under conventional standards and shall result in a recognizable and substantial benefit to the community and to the ultimate users of the developed site. Availability and capacity of public services. The proposed type and density of use shall not exceed the capacity of existing public services, facilities, and utilities. Consistency with the master plan and zoning ordinance. The proposed development shall be consistent with the goals and objectives of the city's master plan, the purpose of the zoning article, and the intent of these plan unit development regulations. And then economic and neighborhood impact. The proposed development shall not impede the continued use or development of surrounding lots for uses permitted by the zoning article or planned in the adopted city master plan. On February 13th, 2024, the next step in the plan unit development process consisted of a presentation of a complete site plan and a public hearing on the proposal. The public hearing was conducted and the Planning Commission discussed the proposal with the applicants. The Planning Commission voted to postpone a decision on the plan for further information. On March 26, 2024, the applicants presented a modified version of their proposal to the Planning Commission based on their previous discussions. The items that were modified include changes in density, which was 64 units down to 60, and the removal of first floor walkout access along the public right-of-way. The Planning Commission voted to recommend that the City Council approve the proposed plan unit development. On May 21st, 2024, the plan unit development was presented to the City Council for discussion on the proposed project. During this meeting, there were some concerns discussed regarding the density and traffic and how it would impact the site and nearby properties. Since then, the applicants have modified the unit makeup by converting 11 of the efficiency units to one-bedrooms, which Joe Tangari will discuss in greater detail shortly. And they've also had a market analysis conducted by Baker Tilly and a rezoning trip generation analysis by Fleiss and Vandenbrink to provide more context as to how this development will impact the site and surrounding area. December 3rd, 2024, today, the applicants are presenting their updated plan unit development proposal along with both the market and traffic analysis reports and an updated list of public benefits. And before we move on, I would also just like to note that this project is in the final stages of being approved for a low-interest loan in the amount of $3.55 million via the Michigan Community Revitalization Program, which is made available via the Michigan Strategic Fund and Michigan Economic Development Corporation, MEDC. The Attorney General's office has already given their approval on that, and on December 10th, the Michigan Strategic Fund Board will be reviewing the final application. And again, Joe Tangari is here from Giffords Webster to provide some more context on the site plan.
Good evening, Joe.
Hello, how are all of you?
Great, of course.
Good. Yes, so you were provided with an updated version of the final PUD review letter in your packet. If you look through that letter, you will notice that there is some underlined text, and that text pertains to like physical elements of the plan that have been changed since the last time you saw it on the revised site plan. Just as a refresher for everyone, this is the old PNC Bank site between Lincoln and Bowers, and it fronts on North Main Street. It's 1.15 acres. The proposed development site does include one lot zoned R1 that's currently occupied by a house in the northeastern corner of the site. When we look at the surrounding sites, we have central mixed use zoning to the north as well as some R2 zoning when you get further down Lincoln. To the west, across Main, it's central mixed use, that's the church, and then the vacant lot over there is city center. To the south is all city center and commercial, and then to the east is R2 and core residential, and that's all single-family homes. Core residential fronts on Bowers, and R2 fronts on Lincoln. So this is a planned unit development, and planned unit development proceeds in 6 stages. So there's a pre-application conference, and Nick has already gone through some of this, so I won't spend too much time on it, but that was held about a year ago. They got through conceptual review and qualification, the public hearing, the Planning Commission recommendation, PC recommended approval earlier this year. Council decision is where we are now. City Council approves or denies the request for planned unit development approval. And then if Council approves the request, there will be a development agreement that gets worked out between the city and the developers, and that ultimately gets approved by Council as well. So our ordinance does outline what is permitted in a planned unit development, and it can permit business, service, office, and commercial uses in tandem with attached single or multifamily uses, or it also permits attached single or multifamily uses on their own. I have some notes about the qualification in this letter as well. I will note that given that it's been granted some brownfield relief, this does actually automatically qualify for planned unit development consideration. That's not a guarantee of approval, but it is a guarantee of qualification. So there's those 2 steps. So the basic proposal is a multifamily development with 1 3-story building, 60 total units, 76 on-site and 8 on-street parking spaces, 10 bicycle spaces, a dumpster enclosure, a screen wall along the eastern property line, and there is a common lobby area and a co-working space on the ground floor of the building as well. So we have those PUD qualification criteria, recognizable and substantial benefit. As I said, they did automatically qualify. given the brownfield relief that was granted. But essentially, what you're looking for in a plan unit development is that you're granting some deviations that are being requested from the standards of the zoning ordinance to effectuate the development, and you're receiving some sort of benefit in return for that. They have provided a letter outlining the public benefits of the project in 10 bullet points, and they also have, in addition to that, a proposal for monetary donations to the city to support beautification, tree canopy, parking management, and a couple other things. I will let them elaborate on that. But that's what one of the things that's been updated since the last time you saw this. A couple of these other things here, availability and capacity of public services, basically looking to make sure that our roads and our pipes can handle the development. And that has been looked at, and yes, our roads and pipes can handle this development. Consistency with the master plan and zoning ordinance is another thing we look at. So the proposed development shall be consistent with the goals and objectives of the city's master plan and the purpose of the zoning article. With the intent of the planned unit development regulations. So the site is labeled downtown core on the future land use map. And per the master plan, that designation corresponds to the city center district, which is the current zoning of nearly all the site. And the master plan calls for buildings built to the sidewalk with no setbacks, parking provided in the rear, minimal disruption of sidewalks by driveways, buildings framing the street. It allows up to 3 stories when the third story is set back. Consideration of accessory building elements such as awnings and lighting as part of the overall design of the building. Landscaping where possible, including planters or pots if other landscaped areas are not available or to complement such areas. Screening of parking with buildings, low walls, or landscaping. And on-street parking where possible. As noted earlier, on-street parking is something that's being provided here. They've got 8 spaces in front of the building on Main. And then economic and neighborhood impact. So this is a criterion that we always consider in light of all the surrounding development and its likely effect on the same. So getting a little further into the review, the review compares this development to the standards of both the city center and the RM2 district, and this is due to a quirk of our PUD regulations, which apply the RM2 district standards to multifamily development and a planned unit development. But we also have to compare the plan to its context, which of course is in the city center district. So all of those standards are laid out versus what's being proposed throughout the letter, and in particular in item number 4 of the letter, dimensional requirements. Before we get to that table though, we should talk about how density is calculated. So density under our ordinance is based on the number of rooms provided in a multifamily project, and unit count is determined based on a schedule. So efficiency units are 1 room, 1-bedroom units are 2 rooms, 2-bedroom units are also 2 rooms, and then 3-bedroom units would count as 4 rooms, and 4-bedroom units would count as 5 rooms. So they are providing 22 efficiency units, 33 1-bedroom units, and 5 2-bedroom units. Those first 2 numbers are reversed from the first time you saw this. They've changed some things about the internal layout. So they originally had 33 efficiencies and 22 1-bedrooms. They've changed that ratio, reversed that ratio. So there is a total of 60 units with a total of 98 rooms. At the RM2 density, which is the guideline for multiple family residential development and a planned unit development, 100 rooms would be permitted on this site. So they're a little below the threshold that would be permitted on this site under RM2 standards. So, and typically in the city center district, the density is just governed by the constraints of the site. So can you fit the parking, et cetera. So when we look at the table, we see the The city center district doesn't have a standard for unit composition, but the RM2 district caps it at 10%. They're at 36.7%. They were a little over 50% before. Lot coverage, there's not a requirement in the city center district. It's 20%. In the RM2, they're at 35.7%. Maximum building height, there is not a limit in the R2 district, but the city center district has a 3-story, 42-foot standard if the third floor is set back 10 feet, and in this case, the third floor is set back 10 feet, so they meet that standard. They're at 3 stories and 36 feet, so they're below the height limit. The city center requires a 15-foot ground floor. They're at 11 feet. There's no requirement in the RM2 district. So they are requesting a shorter ground floor than would typically be required in city center. And then when we look at the setbacks, there is no required front or north and south side setback in the city center district. That's the general character of the city center. It's 50 feet all around in the RM2 district. And they've got a small setback from each of those, the front and the two sides, and that's got some foundation landscaping in it. And then the rear setback is 30 feet in city center and 55 feet in RM2, and they're at 69 feet 10 inches from the rear, which is to the east. They meet the minimum unit sizes for the types of units and all of the units presented on the floor plans. And the next part of the letter gets into some of the city center districts. So when we look at the required parking spaces for residential, 1 space per each efficiency unit, so that'll be 22 spaces. 1.5 for each 1-bedroom unit, so that's 49.5, but under our ordinance, if you have up to 0.5 spaces, you disregard the fraction, so the requirement is 49. And then 2 for each 2-bedroom unit, so that's 10 spaces. Total of 81 are required. They're still at 76, which is what they had before, but of course they've changed the unit composition. So they are now seeking relief for 5 spaces of the requirement, where they were not before. They are also now showing 6 EV spaces, and they're laying conduit for additional EV spaces to be added in the future without digging up the parking lot. They also have now bulbed the curb to provide protection for the on-street spaces out on North Main as well. There are going to be some additional public parking spaces on the north side of Bowers as well. They've not quantified those on their plan or showed dimensions for them, but curbside parking is permitted there, so they would be creating something like 5 or 6 spaces there as well. Of course, you can't use those overnight, but during the day. And right now, that's all driveway. They do have bicycle parking, 10 spaces on the site. Loading areas are not required based on the use of the building. They actually are meeting the transparency requirements of the downtown district, the city center. The main difference between this building and other city center development is that in the city center, if you're fronting on North Main or 14 Mile, a commercial liner use is required along the full principal street frontage. That's actually maybe not quite the right way to say it. It's more like an active non-residential use. The lobby for something would count as a non-residential use, the way it's worded in the ordinance. Or if you had like an exercise area or something would also count that way. But at any rate, the full principal street frontage is supposed to be something other than residential. So a portion of the ground floor here on Main is occupied by a co-working space. That's 606 square feet, in addition to the lobby and a leasing office. So as part of the PUD, the applicant is asking for relief from the liner use standard in order to provide residential units at the ground level on the rest of the North Main frontage. And that's about 70% of the frontage. So 30% is those active uses that we're asking for in the city center district, and then 70% is the residential units. So the liner use is generally intended to preserve a level of street level activity in the downtown. I do note in the letter that the project is not on one of the 4 central blocks of the city center, and there are not downtown destinations to the north. So partial replacement of the liner with residential units is less consequential to the overall activity level of downtown than it would be if it was on, say, the block to the south. We look at landscaping and screening. They do have their required 6-foot wall along the east property line. There is a narrow green belt there as well. The landscape plan does show the required number of parking lot and street trees. DPW is going to have to sign off on the trees facing Lincoln. They've got some hedgerows along Lincoln and Bowers to screen the parking lot. If you recall, when we talked about the master plan, that was one of the things that we call for is screening of the parking lot. And then they've got that foundation landscaping along all the street-facing sides of the buildings as well that I mentioned earlier. The building materials comply with the city center district standards, and they don't have signage on their proposal at this point. It's usually reviewed separately. They have a lighting plan, and that's compliant with our ordinance. Their dumpster enclosure is also compliant with our ordinance. Pedestrian circulation is also compliant with our ordinance. When we look at vehicular access, the residential parking lot is accessed from Bowers and Lincoln. There's a single driveway onto each street. That's compliant with the city center district standards. The RM2 district would require access to a principal street, but that's obviously not in character with the downtown district. I updated this little sustainability passage here to note that they've got those 6 EV parking spaces and the conduit noted on their plan now as well. They did provide a summary traffic study for the site demonstrating lower traffic generation and lower demand for parking than commercial occupancy of the site. The study also indicates a lower peak demand for parking than the quantity of spaces provided. And they have a market study as well demonstrating demand for the proposed project. The last item in the letter talks about the relief that's being requested from ordinance standards. We've highlighted all of that as we've gone through the letter, but it's all summarized at the end for ease of use when you're making a motion. Again, they're really requesting 2 deviations from the city center standards. It's that they don't have the full width commercial liner, and then they don't have the required first floor height. It's when you get into the standards of the RM2 district, which control multifamily uses in planned unit development per our ordinance, that you get into deviations. So the only R2 property that we have in the city for reference is the senior tower. So that's the one R2 project, or RM2, sorry, or not R2, RM2 project that we have in town is the senior tower.
May I ask, how many do they deviate from that? From the R2?
In terms of which standards they deviate from, it's actually summarized on the very last page of the letter. The proportion of efficiencies, lot coverage, front and side setbacks, and driveway position, and then the 81 space parking requirement is a general requirement of the ordinance.
Is it still, the page 8 is what you're referring to where it's summarized, but it says
Right.
from 3/21/2024, and they made changes.
Oh, yeah.
What percentage?
That's
it would-
actually an old date, I'm sorry. This was updated. The table was updated, but that date didn't get changed.
So it's still 55% efficiencies even with the, because that's what it
No,
says. I didn't think so, that's why I'm
sorry,
asking.
yeah, it's 36.7%, yeah. Let me just verify that, but it is, I think, yeah, 36.7%.
I think the confusion might be, you have a similar table on pages, well, it's under number 4 dimensional requirements. And then you've got the old table at the end there on
Oh,
page 8.
sure, yeah,
Page 8,
okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
okay.
Yeah, so page 4 and 5, it looks like the new table
Yeah.
is.
Okay,
36.7% is their efficiency
okay.
rate right now. Yeah, so to summarize, they are, they're really putting up a building that is pretty much dimensionally in line with the downtown district. It's just a little bit different from a use perspective on the ground floor. That's the main difference here. And they're requesting a little relief from the parking for the residential use. And then the RM2 district is what they're primarily deviating from when we look at the actual list of relief that they're requesting from the zoning ordinance.
Anything else for us, Joe? Or is that?
I mean, other than the fact that I do think that it would be beneficial to have some more people living downtown, in terms of, you know, the economic impact that that has on a district like a downtown. I don't have anything else further that's related to the ordinance or anything like that.
Does anyone have any questions for Joe?
Have you had any other developments like this in other downtown centers with residential on the first floor?
Let me think about that. Probably nothing that I've directly reviewed. I mean, there are examples in communities that I've worked in, certainly, but nothing that I've directly reviewed.
I was going through all the comps. I think there were 15 properties. I think there's one that has residential on the first floor in Royal Oak on East 11 Mile, but that's not even close to
Sure.
so the downtown area. There may be another one, Elevate, potentially. I'm not familiar exactly where that is, but that's, again, that's further south from what I can tell from city center.
Yeah, Ferndale's got a few on the east edge of its downtown as well.
Yeah, but I don't think they have residential. The other thing, too, that they have their own parking development that they had put in as part of that, those projects, those two that are on East 9 Mile.
Sure. Well, actually, this has its own parking too. But
No, what I'm saying, there wasn't any, and then they put it in, so that
Oh, sure,
the ground
yeah.
floor has
Yeah.
parking.
yeah.
It seems like the new apartments just north of here, they're, is it across from Kramer Funeral Home? I believe that has residential on the first floor, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah. There's a office up front along the North Main portion of the ground floor, and then
That's Roth.
units
That's
behind.
the Roth.
That's the Roth and Main.
Yeah, that also has it right on, the first floor units are right along on Roth, but that's not city center.
I have a few questions. Last we left it, there were 60 units and 76 parking spaces. Our residents were concerned about parking, they were concerned about overflow. I compared this to a development on Rochester Road in Royal Oak. They had more acreage, and they were like, I think, 42 units. Glenn? And I suggested why you need to have 60 on a smaller site. And naturally, from an investment point of view, you would want to maximize your units. I understand that. But what I'm concerned about is I kind of left it with the comment, I like the look of your plan, I like the layout, it's just a little too big. And one representative of the firm said, I don't know that I can go to 42 units, but I'll sharpen my pencil and see what I can do. What I'm seeing today is the same, it's 60 units, just modified a bit. And in fact, using the standard, you'd need, I think, 81 parking spots instead of 76. So from what I can see, they've gone the wrong way. The units count has not dropped, and the requirements for parking have gone up. So I am concerned about that and what happened to the sharpened pencil, I guess.
I think that's something that the applicant can answer. One thing I'll note just when you're thinking about density is that density on its own isn't a meaningful number. You have to think about it in terms of its context, right? And a downtown is probably the place in your city where you benefit most from a higher density. It's a mix of uses in a downtown district is part of the overall long-term resiliency of a downtown district. And a lot of downtowns in this region did not have a mix of uses really until very, very recently. They were primarily commercial districts that have added a lot of residential recently. It's when you look at Ferndale or Royal Oak or any of the other ones around here, the introduction of residential is sort of more of a new thing in this region because it just wasn't done that way in the mid-20th century.
Shocking. Yeah, because you go from 1979 until I think 1986 in this region, this area. So you take Clawson and you take 1 mile out as a radius. There were no developments for apartments.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden you get into the 2000s, you get 66 units in this area. And again, I'm just ballparking as far as the range. I think the MPA that they had kind of mirrored what I was looking at. And then you have in the 2010s, 146 units. And then in the 2020s, it jumps up to over 1,000.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's a reflection of changes in the marketplace. It's a reflection of changes in patterns of living. Rental is a way of life for a lot of people at this point, particularly at certain points in their lives. A lot of people who are, pre-marriage, pre-children especially, that's what they do. They rent now. Whereas I think renting had a different connotation 30 years ago. That it doesn't anymore. And it's also become a pattern at the other end of life as well when you're looking to get out of your house and stop working on your yard all the time. People are moving into smaller units that are in buildings like this in areas with more activity. And then when you think about it from a business perspective, the more people you have incidentally walking past your door every day, the more likely it is that one of them is going to stop into your business and patronize you.
Well, it was part of the rationale for the Roth project, right? When they came in and they said that you needed to have, we as a community needed to have residents that would utilize that stretch of Main Street in order to, use our downtown.
Yep.
So one of the things that I'm curious about, I don't know if you have this answer, maybe they do, but the percentage of one-bedroom apartments in Clawson to the total availability of units and what that percentage is. I've done my own unscientific study.
Sure.
And it's shocking, to be honest with you. So I'm just curious if there's another
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a solid number on that. But yeah, I mean, I'll let them speak to their market study, I guess is what I'll say.
And I'll just go back and reiterate what I said the last time in the springtime, right? So we had an issue, an applicant back in 2004. If I can find my notes. That they did a report that said and again, this is for historical perspective. Back in January of 2004, the Planning Commission was looking at an amber development. And the report that came out of that, they emphasized that one of the important functions of a zoning ordinance is to limit the inappropriate overcrowding of land by regulating the density of a population. And that was during the Amber Elm site plan and variance reviews. And it was noted that at that time, the supply of one-bedroom apartments in Clawson was oversaturated. So since then, and again, this is unscientific, just taking a survey of all the apartment complexes that we have just in Clawson, that we have, let's see if I filtered it right. Bear with me. We have a total properties of 112. Of those, there are 1,207 total units, and of that, 912 of them are one bedroom, making up 76% of all our apartments are one bedroom or studio.
Well, that's probably not a ratio that's changed much. However, what has changed over the last 20 years is demand.
Sure. But if you take a look at that, for the other communities, they don't have that ratio. We do. And that to me, that's concerning. I want a development where we have people downtown, right? That seems to be the trend. But at the same time, what are we compromising as a result of it? We had a concern back in 2004 regarding the number of single-bedroom apartments in our community, and it's only grown. And I get it as far as for some of the development and having it downtown. That's a new thing. But I'm concerned about having that many people in one site.
Joe, I'm wondering if you might opine on trends in planning on parking minimums. It's my understanding that a lot of communities are scaling back parking minimums or getting rid of them entirely. Now, it seems to me that, obviously, if a potential renter isn't going to have enough parking spots for themselves, they're not going to rent there. I just wondered if you can opine on.
Well, it is true that in general, the thinking now is that parking regulations that were primarily developed in the 1960s have created too much unused pavement. And this is, it's a national trend. You have seen places all over the country reduce their parking requirements for all different types of uses, residential and commercial, industrial especially, actually, because industrial spaces are far less occupied by people than they once were. You have seen some communities outright eliminate parking requirements. I think that Southeast Michigan is a very difficult place to outright eliminate parking requirements because we simply do not have the transit environment here to justify that. But, in downtown Minneapolis, there's no parking requirements because they don't need them. Boston has no parking requirements in most of the city because it's just not necessary. Here you have to have some. However, most of the parking standards in this area were developed a very long time ago. And they were not necessarily developed on the basis of data at the time. The same parking standards are in numerous ordinances, primarily due to the fact that there were basically 3 model ordinances created in Michigan, and they were adopted in modified forms by most of the communities in Michigan at the time. So if you do what I do for a living and you go through I don't know how many zoning ordinances I've looked at in Michigan, but it's probably close to 200. And there's language that I just know because it's in all these different zoning ordinances. And those parking tables, and they're part of that. And I mean, I think that they're probably all due for a look, at least some study. You might not necessarily change anything or everything, but they're all due for some study. You know, one of the things that we have in our ordinance that I don't see in any others in terms of multifamily parking is that we require a third space for a third bedroom. And I think that in a modern development context, it's probably a disincentive to adding a third bedroom because now you've got to find more space on your lot. And yeah, I mean, that is where things are headed. Things are headed toward ultimately lower requirements for the most part.
Which is great if that's where they're headed in places where it's appropriate, but in a place like Clawson, in this specific area, when parking is already at a premium, it's a negative, and there's going to be a significant impact to people who invested in businesses in that area if we don't have appropriate parking. Considering making changes to that would not serve anyone well, right? And because like even a one-bedroom apartment, 2 people can live in a one-bedroom apartment, right? You guys don't have you don't have limits on how many people can occupy, right? If you have a one-bedroom, you could still have a couple who lives there. That's 2 cars. And I know there's a 1.5. Like you could easily get to that extra 1.5 with half of your people sharing a room with, you know, their significant other or child or whatever. So I would like to not paint the picture that it would be wise for us to even consider looking at adjusting our parking standards, no matter what the rest of the world is doing at this time, because it doesn't serve you, it wouldn't serve you guys well, you'll get the calls, and it certainly wouldn't serve our businesses and surrounding areas well either. So, just my thought.
The 8 public parking spaces, those aren't available for overnight parking.
No, nothing on the street is available for
Overnight.
overnight parking in Clawson.
I mean, whereas I sincerely appreciate them reducing the number of efficiencies, because that was my main concern, I still am fairly concerned about the parking. If someone has a holiday party and invites 10 of their friends, and all of a sudden, everyone comes home and doesn't have a place to park their car unless, you know, I mean, there's a concern about the ability, you know, the 5 short for the potential residents, period. But then anyone has anyone visiting, and then, you know, just mayhem. I can imagine coming home and there's no parking place to put your car, and it's the end of the day, and what are you going to do with your car? I think the parking's still a concern.
Yeah, that's part of my concern is where's the public benefit for it? If we have to infringe upon the ability of neighbors in order to use the street for their own purposes.
Right, or even there's, you know, all the parking lot behind some businesses right there, but those get crowded right now. It's hard to find a parking spot when you want to go there now. And then you have residents there and.
Okay, if we don't have any more questions.
If you could, please, if a member of the investment group could explain to me why they left at last meeting, that they would look at reducing from 60 units to something less.
Would you like us to answer, then present? Then we'll do a presentation. I can answer that question directly.
You presented the basics, which is 60
Sure.
units.
Sure.
You've modified some of the efficiencies into
Correct.
bedrooms, which is fine.
Yeah.
But the basic size of the project has not changed.
That's correct.
The parking ratio to units has gotten worse, not better.
That's correct.
I think we're all concerned about the parking. So one of your representatives said, I can't promise you 42 units, but I can look at something less. But that hasn't happened. Why?
Sure. So we looked at that project you mentioned at the last meeting, and to us, the quality of that development is not where this is. That project has no elevator, has walk-up units, right? So your people are walking up to their units. It's not has no elevator in the building, you know, for its residents on it. So for us, in order to provide the level of finishes, to provide the elevator, to provide all the windows and the glass and the materials that you want to see in a city center, we needed that extra density, right? So if we went to a 42 unit, development, you wouldn't see as much glass, as much brick. There'd be no elevator. There'd be walk-up units. And to us, that's not what City Center in Clawson needs, and we would prefer to provide what I consider a Class A project with all the amenities you would expect in that type of a unit in Clawson in the city center. That was the biggest reason why we stayed at 60 units. When I looked back, I looked at that specific project, and it's missing all of those things in order to make that project work.
Okay, and I respect the fact that you can't replicate the 42-unit model, and I didn't expect you to, but I hope to see some in-between number for this review. A few less units, a little more parking, maybe we could find that happy medium. At this point, we're not there.
Completely understand, and we switched the units from the efficiencies to the one beds, right, on Councilmember Moffitt's recommendation of let's get rid of some of those efficiencies, let's turn them into one beds. We've kept the same bed count, right, so there's no change in bed count in the building. It's really just rearranging the inside to keep the same amount of beds, get the parking, get the efficiencies in studios to where City Council we thought would want us to be. And that caused that 5-spot deficiency by converting those units. But at the same time, it's the same bed count that was presented with the approved parking, right? So if we go back to those efficiencies, our parking now meets the city code. But from our last meeting, it came to our attention that the city wanted to see more one bedrooms than studios, and so we kept the same bed count. And that was big for us to not increase bed count. So the bed count's exactly the same. It's just rearranging the rooms to make those one beds instead of studios.
I just want to make sure that we understand that my concern is that I wanted to see something significantly different, and that's not what we have here. All we have is a rearranging of rooms, and it's actually gotten worse.
So the Councilmember Shepherd, your recommendation, and I think, and I don't want to speak for you, was to have more retail on that first floor, right? To have that retail liner to at our last meeting. And if we add that retail liner all across of Main Street, traffic and parking requirements go up significantly. And if you look at our traffic study, to have a 15,000 square foot plaza instead of this building, just a nice retail plaza up front, would increase traffic by over 400 or 500 cars daily in and out of this, because you'll have restaurants and shops and people be parking in and out daily, right? So traffic count goes up significantly more than this use. So
It sounds like that's what we want. We want more traffic downtown.
You want more cars, and that was not my understanding, that you want more traffic. All the residents that came said we don't want more cars there, we don't want more traffic there, right? That was my understanding.
Those were the people who lived on the streets right there,
So
right? Those are the people who are concerned about a flow, and I think he was very clear about wanting that development on the lower level because it's a buffer and it doesn't look like apartments in that area. And if you guys can't do it, you can't. I know you have negatives for everything.
Sure.
And I think the concern is when we discussed the number of studio apartments versus 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom. I think the intent was not really just to add a wall and a door on existing space, but to perhaps cut the space a little bit so that there were some fewer units. And the fact that this looks exactly like it was, there's not really any deviation. So how can you help us get to a yes for you? We are all, I believe, in favor of having a beautiful development there. I read this very thoroughly. Some of the words scare me. It says when it talks to finishes and stuff, it talked about, it was a word that was like, we think, didn't say think, but no guarantees, in what the finishes are. I work for an AE firm. I know as soon as money gets tight, we change those things, with approval, of course, with the owner, but those things change. And you're offering us something really high end. High end is great, but it has to fit our community, and our community is growing, but does it have to grow to your specifications? You have to listen to the community as well. Like, it's really critical for us to have a partner here. You guys are going to be great neighbors. I've spoken with one or two of you about what you've done in other communities. Like, that's all really hopeful, but we have to get to a place where we all agree that this works for Clawson, not just for you guys. And I think that's what everyone has said so far.
And, my response is, how do we get there, right? Because it seems like it's we go back to the drawing board and we come back and then we have gone back and forth and, is there a way, and I don't know the answer to this, through a PUD agreement to be able to work with city council to get, to have more candid conversations on, hey, this is what we're thinking, to not have to do it every 3 months or 4 months to get to a place where city council is there and we're there, that makes sense for everybody.
We're here now, and you heard the comments last time. I think that's why we're here. In all due respect, I know you guys want to get there. You don't want to waste time. You want to get your project up and going.
Do we
It's
have
not
to go
helping you
back to
till you do.
planning for that? I'm just asking, just for,
Through the PUD process. So, I think it's us, right?
That's correct, unless you're changing the footprint and making those kind of changes.
So if
And
we
it
make
really would
something-
be much, right? They could change their footprint 5 feet, and it would go back to planning.
Correct.
Can I ask a question? How
Yes.
you plan to address the parking issues? Like, if everyone, like theoretically, you could rent everything out and then be 5 parking spots short. I mean, that could be a legitimate thing. Like, how do you plan to address the parking issue with the people who would potentially rent?
So usually on a project like this, it'd be with parking passes, right? So you would have the ability to, when a resident, signs a lease, they'd get 1 space or 2 spaces. And at the end of the day, if there's a space short, if we go with the 1 beds like like we have now, the resident would have to make a decision. 2 of us are living in a 1 bed. We don't get 2 spaces. This is not the right building for us.
So you would be up front with
Correct.
potential
Yes,
residents
yes.
about
Completely upfront.
like, hey, sorry, we're out of spaces. So.
Correct. Yeah. If there was a 1 bedroom left and 1 space left, and they have 2 of them, we'd be up front and say there's not 2 spaces.
So you anticipate then issuing parking permits? So it's not just an open lot that's shared.
That's correct. It's not an open.
So
lot.
if you had a 1-bedroom apartment, you have to apply for 1 and/or 2 spaces.
That's correct.
So to
During the
that,
application process, you would say, I need 2 vehicles or 1 vehicle during the application process, which is very common in all apartment complexes, whether it's a large one or a small one.
so to that end, visitors aren't allowed to park in the parking lot. If you need a parking pass to park, then visitors aren't allowed to park in the parking lot.
And that's the 8 spots up front and the public lots. And it's my understanding, and I might be misspoken. Is the streets allowed to park overnight as well?
No, I asked that. They
Right.
said no.
So
Yeah.
I mean, so the thought is, like you have the holiday party. If you have it in your neighborhood as well, those cars have to be off the road at nighttime as well. So we're going to be held to the same standards as the residents in the city of Clawson, right? Because you can't park on streets overnight either way. So if you have a holiday party in a single family residence or in this building, the residents' cars have to go. The guests' cars will have to be gone at nighttime.
But you can call them in the city, in the suburb, or in our subdivisions, you can call a car in and say, it's going to be here overnight with the police. I've done it a million times. You can't do that in downtown. You can't call in and say, these cars are going to be here overnight. So I've got a bunch of young kids renting the house next to me. They have several parties every now and then, and they will call their cars in. I mean, so there is that advantage. Plus, there's a difference between, I'm having a party and my neighbors know that people are going to park on the street for a period of time versus I'm having a party and guess what? You can't park in the parking lot because if you do, someone's not going to be able to park their car at night. I mean, so I like the passes thing so people know, but it also, it doesn't address, when we were here before, some residents were concerned about, okay, so everybody's going to be parking in front of my house because there's a visitors coming to any visitor. So hands down, any visitor, if those 8 spots are taken, any visitor is going to be parking in front of the residents' houses and taking up the spots down
Or the
street.
public lot, right? Or and if that public lot overflows, there's people who still park on the street, right? So, I mean,
And it does, is the issue. I mean, it
Understood.
does today.
Understood.
Right, so it's just exacerbating the parking issue is what we're concerned about.
but that, I think that's where I kind of get stuck, right? Because if you do something like a restaurant or more retail, that problem gets much worse than this project, right? So you've got this is how we like to see it. And then on the other side, I have, let's put more retail and make it more like the downtown, which makes that problem
I think that's fair.
3 or
You're
4 or
fair.
5
Right.
times
We
worse.
would have a parking
So
spot,
when
yeah.
I need to go back to my plans, it's like, how do I juggle competing ideas from city council to get to the approvals? And that's why I was asking, if there's a way, to be able to do that without having to come and I make it all, retail, and you say the parking is terrible, and I got 30 residents out here that are saying they're going to park down our streets, which is not what we're trying to do either, right? So it's trying to do that balancing act, and I'm having a hard time getting there because of the differing opinions, if that makes sense.
Well, I think we just need less people on your site. You need less units on your site, from my view. Like I can't imagine you can't make it work if you choose to make it work. I mean, I guess it might not be the revenue that you're looking for overall, but you're getting you've been given a 10-year tax abatement by this body. They were generous in that. It was a good faith effort to say, yeah, we'll take your beautiful project. Come on, bring it in. And then here we are, and you're saying, I don't know how to do this, but you've not really done anything. You've added walls and put in a couple doors and decreased the need or increase the need for more parking. And we have younger kids who would be the age, if they didn't already own properties, to rent from you. These people have friends over like all the time. Like my kids almost always have someone at their place. So let's say 10 of those 60 people have someone extra there at any given time from like 5 to 11. When the businesses are already busy, those 10 people in that parking lot over there take spots away from people who are investing their businesses here as well and trying to make their dimes. And people, if they can't park near something, they go somewhere else.
I would also like to say that, as part of that in the businesses downtown, you're adding, approximately about 1.8 million in disposable income to the downtown. So you do have residents that will be going to restaurants, nightly and daily. So to say that that this development would take away from the businesses downtown economically, I think is
Well, they don't want to swap. They don't want you to say, oh, we're going to trade you for the guy who just drove past in his car because there's no place to park. I mean, it should be a build on. It should be a plus, not a minus, right? And that's my number one concern about this. I really care. I care
So if the
that we're
parking
not
met
creating
code-
something that takes something away from something that's already there. Whatever we
Understood.
put here should be something that benefits the community at large. My number one issue with the PUD is it's supposed to be a community benefit. I don't get the community benefit with this. I just don't see it. It's already been approved. That's fine. We're here. I guess, we just need some ideas from you, like what you're willing to do, again, to help us make this happen for you, because we want it to happen.
Understood.
But we want something that works for us.
And I think a big thing in the community development is I heard your comment specifically about the tax abatement, right? And then we're getting a 10-year tax abatement, or we've received from this body a 10-year tax abatement last year. And, again, I want to make clear that doesn't mean we're not paying taxes. We still pay the same taxes PNC paid. Our taxes will go up, God willing, with the development, not to the full uncapped limit, but they will go up with development. And then after that 10 years, then it will uncap to the full taxable value for its remaining lifespan, 50, 60, 100 years. And as part of that, we wanted to give back to the city. And those items that we presented, that should be in your packet from I'd call them a, good faith donation to help bridge that gap, right? Because of that let's call it less tax revenue for the tax abatement that the city provided us. We wanted to go and provide back to the city. We wanted to give back $25,000 for DDA beautification downtown, however the city would like to use that, whether it's for the 4th of July or, new lights. A citywide tree canopy, also $25,000 to increase the landscaping and trees around the city. $25,000 to the city, all of the public parking lots, whether they need potholes or repaved or new ceiling. And then we heard from the residents as well at one of our meetings about a new dumpster enclosure in the lots, and we were willing to give $15,000 for a new dumpster enclosure. And this is for us giving back to the city who gave to us in that tax abatement, right? And that was part of what I heard from you, Mayor, when we discussed it, is we got the tax abatement. We need some, give back to the city. And we're here to give back to the city. We are here to be a long-term partner with the city. This isn't a build and be gone. We're here to build with the city. We heard the Parks and Rec plan, right? We like to give back to the city that we're a part of. And that's part of this is we're trying to be a good partner. We want to be a good partner with the city. We're trying to just find a quicker and faster way. If this is not the project for the city and the city votes it down today because we can't change it without going back to planning and whatnot, is how do we get to a solution that makes sense?
But I think you can, right? If you scale it back, you can go back to planning.
Mayor, if I may.
Yes, sir.
So to understand the current situation clearly, if they substantially change the site plan, it has to go back to planning. So if the line in the sand is, hey, we need the parking ratios and the bed count to line up by ordinance, period, and that's the line in the sand, they might have to chop off 5 units potentially, and that would be you couldn't come to an agreement tonight based on those substantial changes. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, it would be, if there's any substantive change to the plan that alters obviously the footprint by.
And it sounds like
it's very de minimis.
What everyone's
the change.
asking for is a substantive change.
So obviously, one of the options, I mean, there's more than that option obviously available to the applicant, but one of those options is indeed to go back.
I'm just trying to think out loud, on the spot
we
here.
appreciate it.
And the
This is
answer
a
to your
process.
earlier question is exactly that. Unfortunately, the way that this is set up, it is here, and the 5 of them are available to you here tonight to be able to have this. And it's not necessarily, if I may, Madam Mayor, with your permission, of course, and it's not necessarily a back and forth negotiation per se, but within the terms of the impending, if there was to be some opening in the terms of you would come up with tonight, we would have in the development agreement subsequently.
And that would be hopefully my goal here tonight is we come to some mutual agreement that would be hashed out in the development agreement. City council would still have to approve that, is that correct?
Correct.
Through that agreement, but gets us to at least a shared vision, hopefully, to get to a conclusion without having to go back to planning. I think, if we go to those units, right, if we hit parking by code, are your concerns the same? I mean, are we still going to have a parking issue if we meet parking by code? If we go back to the 33 efficiencies and 22 one-bedrooms and meet parking by code, right, are you asking me to go over I don't know. I don't know the answer. I mean,
if you just go back to the ratio, for me, that's a non-starter. Yeah.
Because we still have
I mean,
we need
there's a
extra
lot of
parking.
variances that we're using RM2 in order to put, and again, I go back to looking at some of the, I think, like I said, there's 15 samples that you recited, that the ones that are in downtown all have commercial liner. So my concern is that what are we giving up for a commercial liner in our downtown for 30, 40, 60 years down the road? Because your development is there and it has residences. That's my concern.
Understood.
And Councilman Shepard, I think the advocacy for that as a public benefit is to have more spending power in downtown to support our existing commercial businesses instead of generate more to compete with that. If you look at downtown, we have, I can think of 5 completely vacant lots right now that have no activity and haven't had any activity for a handful of years. We have seen some rather significant turnover in our already existing commercial retail spaces that, I hope that those businesses will maintain. And by injecting, people living within a very close proximity to go walk daily and support those businesses, we won't have that same turnover. And so I think that's the crossroads we're at is, I think we could all agree that there is somewhat of an existing parking issue in downtown. And I think primarily one of the issues is that we don't have great wayfinding. You don't see a lot of people parking in the southwest lot to go eat at a restaurant in the northeast lot. You want to go directly to where you're at, where in most downtowns you'll park anywhere and walk a couple blocks. And so the concept of having the residential units on the first floor was for that, to support our existing commercial retail instead of create more to compete with them.
My concern with that, though, is that if we go down this road and those vacant properties right now in our downtown, they'll do exactly the same thing. That's a concern, because we're now compromising what our master plan was for that. And no other community in their downtown has this type of development, with those type of residentials on their main street in their downtown.
Can you tell me what kind of security provisions would be in place for those first floor? Like, I think of when I travel for work, I always, in a hotel, like, I don't want to be on the first floor because someone can jump in the window and kill me, right? So what, I'm a joy. But, so what kind of security provisions are there going to be in place for those first floor residents?
I mean, from
Is there any?
an extra security, I don't know how you can get, I don't know what extra security. You can come speak.
Through the chair, I guess. So we will likely have it, well, not likely, we will have an intercom system. So people will not be able to enter in through the street. They have to enter in through the backside with a pure intercom system. And also, since there really is no doors on that side, there's no way that anybody could specifically enter in.
Saying through the window.
Well, through the window?
Oh, well, whichever. I mean, that's just an exaggeration. But so to understand the first floor.
Yes, to get into the building, yes, there would be security to get into the building. You would have a key fob, a code, and intercom system to call into the resident and buzz you in. That's how that, from the outside, from a window, it's the same as a residential house.
Both from the lobby and then inside the unit itself. So there will be 2 moments of when
Okay.
people have security. If this is
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Mayor. Thank you. I just want to go back to Councilman Shepherd, your comment about the potential of what could happen in those units, and might not like this response, but I would just say,
It's fine.
if
You and I do this all the time.
exactly. If we do nothing, there's a chance that nothing happens in those properties and they stay vacant. And so I have some data that I got from the county assessing office. And so there are 5,160 parcels in Clawson. Of those, 4,737 are residential and 408 are commercial. And in my opinion, a community like Clawson that is traditionally a bedroom community made up of whatever that breakdown percentage is of single-family homes, is that puts a heavier tax burden on those individuals. We just had the bond approved in November, and I believe that we need to maximize the use of our commercial parcels instead of having, 5 or 6, 7 of them in our downtown completely vacant that aren't generating anything productive for the community.
Yeah, you'll get no argument from me on that. My concern is that we already have our master plan, that we have an identity that we'd like for our community in our downtown that says that we have storefronts or retail on the first floor. So that if we go down this road, that said, like, the only way that we can develop those parcels is that we say you can have residences on all these vacant parcels. That truly transforms what we're trying to achieve for our downtown. And I don't see that.
But I guess I would say we haven't seen that be executed at this point.
No, but my point is that this is precedent.
Right.
Right, and just because you approve this one doesn't mean you have to approve the next one. I think by doing this, by having those additional 60 to 80 residents in the area, you have the opportunity for people to want to invest in Clawson, to bring in other commercial and retail that has an existing immediate market that can spend within a quarter mile of where their business is.
Sure, and again, I'll go back to what I'd said before about density. And, you know, that's something that I do have a concern about, right? For this particular parcel, it's interesting that some of the other comparables that were looked at previously, one of them being the Genesee development that we talked about. Mr. Anderson had asked about it. There was the 42 unit one, right? So it's a larger parcel. So they have a.
It's not in it's not in a city center though. Correct?
No, not at all. Well, what's funny is that for Royal Oak, that was originally supposed to have a first floor liner. It went to their ZBA, and their ZBA said, no, we don't like this. And so then they came back as a PUD and circumvented that altogether, right? So that was supposed to have one, right? So, but again, you know, for the density on that property, I think it's like 58 units per acre, which is significantly more than any of the other ones in our area. That's significantly more than the Roth, significantly more than the Genesee that's over in Royal Oak, significantly more than what the Claus Ace Hardware is. So while that's a sticking point, I think it's because, for me, if that first floor is residential, that all that is just massive people in a tiny area that I don't think it's something that we've not seen in our community, and I'm not sure if we're prepared to go down that road for. I mean, it's presented to us, and I get it.
I understand.
It's a beautiful building, right? But again, as I've said previously, you know, just because you show us that, you know, in my previous life as a planning chair, I would say, what else do you have? And I haven't seen it. You know, I don't know what that is, right? But those are the concerns that I have, and I've heard that from a number of other people. In fact, there's a number of people who didn't like Clawsonian when it went in, because like, well, that's changing the character. But as it turns out, that fit more into with the guidelines that we had established for our master plan and our city center than anything else. So that's.
So I hear you that the concern is density. Do you believe a retail liner will create less density?
No, I'm saying, that is the one concern I have that I'm kind of going back and forth on, right?
Because that's my hurdle too, right? Yeah. I'm hearing less density, less density, less density. Adding a retail liner exponentially increases density, right? Exponentially increases cars, exponentially increases how many people are on the site at one given time.
If that
right?
is, if you're trying to maintain the same number of units.
Well, if you had retail, if I had a retail liner with restaurants down there, the number of residents or the number of patrons and residents on that site will go significantly up. The density will go significantly up. So I don't know how to bridge that gap of I need less density, but I also need retail. Retail increases density, doesn't lower density. This is the lowest density you can do.
I don't understand. I mean, by if you got rid of those residences on
Correct.
the first floor.
And made it retail.
Made it retail. How is it for dwelling units per acre? How does that change?
I think there's maybe a disconnect between the word density and the word activity. So
yes, I will agree with that. Yeah,
so
yeah.
if you took the units out on the ground floor and put residential uses there, you would have lower density of residential units on the site, but you'd have more overall activity.
Yeah, it's what it's the, yes, it's what is it, dwellings per acre, I guess is a better
But
term.
is the concern people sleeping there or actually being on site and cars and traffic on site? That's where activity and density don't match up, right? If you want lower density, right, but you're asking me to increase activity, right, at the same time. And that's the hurdle, right? Because if I come back and I say retail liner and we're going to have 500 more cars coming in and out of that plaza every single day.
Okay, well,
right?
let me go back and, as Joe pointed out,
Yeah.
it's dwelling units, your units per acre is a concern.
Understood.
Mr. Shepherd, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
So they, based on the RMT requirements, they are below what that site would allow. And then just regarding parking, traditionally, I can't think of a project in the city center CMD that was required to have their own dedicated private parking lot. Typically, that's waived by the planning commission due to the public parking. And so
Clawsonian had it.
right, they did, but they had, so I do have that number. They have 123 parking spots on site, and they're providing 76. And so I think that's also why the unit per acreage has a greater discrepancy, is because they had to provide 45 extra parking spaces because of the commercial component.
Again, I'll go back and take a look as far as the Genesee spot. It's 1.2 acres, 42 living units, and that's what breaks out to be 35 units per acre, right? And we've got, if we look at 516 North Main, right, 0.55 acres, and they have 14 living units, so that's 25.5 units per acre. We're looking here, 1.15 acres and 60 living units, that's 52 units per acre. That's significantly more than any of the other locations.
Well, and to the Genesee one in Royal Oak, I imagine that they had more setbacks to meet, because it's right on Rochester Road. It's that property, correct?
2 stories.
Right on Rochester Road.
Right, so they're surrounded by residential properties, and so they had to have more setbacks met. And so this property goes right up to the lot line, and so there's not the same amount of space to put additional green space or empty space.
I guess, looking at their development and in a larger space, the fact that they have less units per acre, I guess if you were to use that and replace that with the first floor commercial use, you could get to a point where you're similar to the number of people that are living on a 1.15 acre location.
I would respectfully suggest that the density isn't much greater than what happens at Clawson Manor right now. That's 15 stories, 14 or units. Hold on, my turn.
But I'm saying it's RM2.
My turn to talk.
Sure, it's RM2.
251 units, 14 stories. You get about the same thing with this. It's not significantly denser.
Do we want another Clawson Manor? Clawson Manor is great.
right.
I was just there 2 weeks ago. They had a beautiful.
But it's not another
upgrade.
Clawson Manor.
Part of
It's
it.
3 stories. It's small.
understand that.
It's luxury apartments for the downtown dwellers.
Exactly, but you're comparing portions of Clawson Manor with this and saying they're the same, and you just pointed out they're not the same.
Clawson Manor has its own zoning, right? So it's not deviating anything. It was built specifically and has its own zoning. We're trying to take.
Was it at the time?
At the time, yeah. Yeah. So, and that's part of my concern with this too, the fact that and this is the second time this has happened in the last meeting, is that we've butted up against our ordinances and we're trying to circumvent them by creating something that doesn't surpass what we have expected in the first place. And we're doing that by using an RM2 ordinance, of which we still have to have 5 different deviations from that in order to make this fit.
Well, I respectfully suggest maybe our ordinances aren't that great.
I didn't say they were. What my point is that now we need to have those reviews as opposed to being prompted in order to make those changes. There's a reason why they were there in the first place, and certainly we need to have those reviews on a periodic basis, but not every time there is a development prompt that we have to surpass this in order to achieve something that we said we didn't want in the first place.
Well, I'll tell you what. The DDA unanimously voted for this. Shar from the Chamber of Commerce has come up here and advocated for it. The Planning Commission voted for it. I received exactly 1 email regarding this unit this go-around, and it was for it. I'm not sure where the idea of this public opposition comes from, because I'm not hearing it. It's not on the Facebooks. It's not on the, it's not on the message boards. It's not in my emails. I think it would be a great asset to Clawson, bring in more taxpayers and help get this downtown and all these vacant lots going again.
Sure, and I'll say this, I've said it before, I am not opposed to development. I don't think anyone here is opposed to development. It's just right now, as presented, This is not something that I can support.
And to be fair, at the previous meeting back, whenever that was, there was a room full of people opposed to it, if we recall. I mean, I don't know, holidays, they're disengaged, or they're not paying attention or whatever, but there was some opposition, at the time. Again, I say, there was concessions we asked for, you made some concessions. I think there's still, there's concerns, but it sounds like you do have a plan for the parking issue. I still think, how many people remember the woodpile thing and them fighting with the people at Tavern on the Main because the parking thing wasn't in consideration, and they were here yelling at the council meetings about them fighting and all that kind of
Tavern
stuff.
on the Main got negative reviews for people parking there
Right.
who never even went to Tavern on the Main.
Right, and that was the issue, because when that building was approved, there were parking issues that were glossed over, and it continued to be a problem for a long time, and for the businesses in that area. So, those who do not remember history are destined to repeat it, right? I mean, and so that's, we don't want to, in a year and a half, have all those businesses here yelling at us for not addressing the parking issues, which were pretty clear, right? And so I think, I agree, again, I appreciate the concessions that were made. And I appreciate it's a pretty facility, and I appreciate the people speaking out about it. But some of the public issues were not addressed about it going on Lincoln and that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, the parking is still
I thought about
a concern. Ooh, someone's got an idea.
Yeah, I had the same idea, but I need to run it by him first. And this, the architect knows a lot more than I do on that. And one possibility that could work, at least for Councilmember Shepherd, would be to extend the retail on Main Street, not go all the way to the end, right? Because once you get to Lincoln, north of Lincoln, there's no lots for anybody to go and park in. There's no place for anybody to go there and then go to a retail on the corner of Lincoln and Main, right? And that's why we put everything, on the front side. On the Bauer side, I mean, again, is it possible that we can potentially add more retail to the front side of Main to maybe go halfway up Main and then the other half, right? Keep it as residential?
If I may, really
Yeah,
quick.
sure.
Sorry, Jason Krieger with Creekland Architects. So, what Michael's talking about extending the retail or like the non-residential space along Main Street, that'd be almost exactly like what we did with Billings Place, which is at 11 in Main in Royal Oak. Now, it's not technically the downtown, but it's just north of the actual DDA proper. And the whole point of that was to activate it. So you have workout space, the gym, the lounge, all that kind of stuff. We did do a project in downtown Royal Oak where there's no retail at all. It's all residential. However, it's parking in the lobby. And so the lobby is activated on the downtown or on the street. We're designing one right now that's in for planning that's in the downtown. And it's just parking and lobby. So it just depends because it's a little bit more on the fringe of the proper downtown. So the retail wouldn't work. So that's why we're doing that. This is very close to the downtown, but it's right at the kind of at the fringe. And so I'm hearing everything and I'm agreeing with what everybody's saying. But if we were to extend that, lose some units.
Yeah, so we lose.
So now the parking count gets better, right? And then now it's more activated space and it's not just residences on the main street. That maybe that's a way to start.
Yeah, and maybe
make
That's
everybody
a way to
happy.
start a conversation.
Yes, and
There
that
we
was
go.
the thought I had that I would have to ask him just to make sure it's possible. But that would keep the building the same size, right? And I guess the question is, can we get to a PUD agreement where we're working with the city and city council to hit those points to increase the retail? It would drop units, a few units. It looks like 2 or 3 units. I don't know how parking. That's a Joe question. How adding that retail would affect our parking count by code.
Retail needs more parking than residential.
So
We have to park on site, Joe.
There is the ability to waive the ground floor retail requirement but that's of course something that has to be specific.
I think it needs fleshed out, right?
Yeah, and-
In principle, I like where you're going with it, but I need to see more meat on the bone, right?
Understood. And I,
Partway there by moving your exercise room to the Main Street side of the building from the north side of the building.
correct.
And that wouldn't require any more parking, but it would move an active use over.
And they would extend that so that we would lose some units. The idea is to try and reduce the deficit in the parking, or maybe eliminate it, and then increase the activated space.
And that would be, my question to city attorney is, can those items get fleshed out in the PUD agreement? If the city doesn't agree, city council doesn't agree, they still don't agree and they don't approve the agreement. I mean, that's.
I think if you were close, I think the answer would be yes, because we would present the development agreement, but I'm not sure how close we are, just.
I need to see something a little bit more. Pen to paper.
Understood.
Or pixel to the computer screen.
You're good. I mean, I don't know what's the,
So do we withdraw the motion to approve or whatever, and then they
You
go
can
out?
postpone, yes.
And they go and redo their letter, their new proposal, and then come back?
I just want to make clear though, by doing that, the parking count will get worse. I just want to make that clear up here. The parking count will get worse if we add retail to Main Street, and we will need a waiver for first floor parking, right? I don't want to do that and then come back and say your parking counts don't match, because they won't, according to Joe, if we increase retail there. I don't, if that makes sense. Don't want to have to go do it and come back and say our parking count doesn't work.
So explain further, if you could, regarding Billings Place and what that entailed.
Sure, so those are amenities for the residents, is what it was.
So there's no residences on that
That's correct.
side? Okay.
Yeah, that's correct, yeah. It's parking on both sides, and then there's amenity space in the middle. That's what it is.
So could you lose a few more units to make this work better? Because you're talking about maybe losing 3 to accommodate some sort of retail.
Correct.
Is there any way you could sharpen your pencils some more and lose a few more on the lower levels so that it's...
I don't think the parking, and I don't have the counts for retail parking, but we're going to come back and ask for a bigger variance than we are today. If you add 3,000 square feet of retail, Joe might tell me I need 40 spaces, right? And that's not going to happen, right, on this site. And that's why we went with multifamily from day one, was adding retail would increase parking counts significantly. We heard from Planning Commission, we don't want to do a parking variance. And adding retail to that liner will create a parking variance. And that's, so I think Councilmember Shepherd understands that. I mean, that's the balance, that when going through planning, there was no way to get a parking variance. So we had to do all multifamily. And if we add retail, I will be standing here in front of you asking you for a 20-spot variance or a waiver of retail, if that's what it's called, Joe, in the city. A waiver of the parking for the retail on the first floor.
Or you could change your unit sizes and make them a little larger, which would alleviate the need for more parking, and that's an option as well.
Can I ask Councilmember Shepherd, are you opposed to living space in the first floor? You want something other than living space, not necessarily a retail establishment, but I think what the gentleman was saying, if you make your workout facility more on the first floor and lose the units that way, is that?
It's getting there.
Okay,
At least
so not necessarily retail, but something other than living space.
My concern is, you're looking at the Roth project, right? Because I oppose that. And one of them is the fact that you have somebody's door wall within 1.5 feet of the sidewalk, right? And that, I'm not sure exactly how this is going to be presented, but it's still living space that is now, currently, the way that that building is set up, you have at least a 6-foot barrier between the edge of the building, green space, and then sidewalk. Right now, I think you're either abutted to or maybe 1.5 feet in some.
3 feet. 2.5, 3 feet.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
So, but it depends, right? Because you've got some green space
Correct,
in
yeah.
between with
Yeah.
some,
That's right.
daylilies. Don't get me started. But anyway. Right? that's an encroachment to that space for pedestrians that people have not yet gotten accustomed to, and to have that not just be encroachment onto that walkability, you now have residences on top of that, right? And that's my concern, because I look at some of these other communities, they don't have that, right? Very few have any that are close. I mean, Billings obviously is something different, right? It's not downtown, but it's certainly not that Amber on 11,
Right.
which looks like well, don't get me started on that either. That's awful. Right? They're outside of the pedestrian traffic that we're looking to see,
Right.
to have encouraged people to walk through. Having to walk past somebody close to downtown who has a 52-inch plasma screen TV and whatever is going on, I think that could potentially be a detractor. And I'm already hearing it from people who are on Roth as it is, right? That they have to pass by that or walk on a different side, change their living patterns in order to accommodate somebody that wasn't there previously.
Yeah, sure. So just 2 points really quick. So I think part of what inspired the thought of expanding the amenity space was because I think what Joe was saying is that what would comply with whatever section of ordinance he was quoting is not residential. It would be amenities, something that's not a living unit. So that's where we're like, well, hey, why not expand that? So when people are walking by, they're looking at a lounge, maybe it's a co-work space, whatever it is, it's something kind of neat. Back to your point, you're not looking at somebody watching, some show on TV. We did do a project, again, it's not downtown, but it's right on Main Street in Royal Oak, right across the street from Holiday Market. It's called Elevate, and those have units right on the ground floor, so right there. But this would be stepped back a bit with some green space. That was the idea, is to create a buffer. So we're hoping that if we could shuffle some things around, we're achieving that goal of getting rid of the units, reducing the parking, hopefully, but complying with what Joe was talking about. So.
So you had a presentation for us.
I mean, I think we've gone through
Yeah,
all of it at
I want to make
this
sure
point.
you hit everything you wanted to.
I mean, I think so. We talked about bed counts. We talked about giving back to the community. We talked about the traffic counts and the low density of traffic and trip generations. My ask would be is I think we've made progress the last 20, 30 minutes here on it. Hopefully you guys think the same. And, I think at this point it would be very difficult, unless you tell me it's impossible to have the building size as is. If it's possible to work with the building, I would ask that we go through that PUD where you can get those renderings, you can get the idea, right? And it doesn't have to be as formal, so we can kind of go back and forth, and the city council says, or the city tells us, we want this to happen, we want that to happen, so we can get to that PUD agreement where everybody is on the same page. Again, PUD agreement has to be approved by this body as well, but this gives us kind of that intermediate step where we're close, and now, you tell me, we'd like one more retail, and I can call Jason and he can do it, and we can send it back, and he can work with the site plan, and we can keep that conversation going in a more productive way, if that makes sense.
We're here every other Tuesday, and we welcome you
Yeah,
with your ideas.
Thank you.
Okay.
And unfortunately, it's difficult because obviously the OMA governs, as this body is all too aware of, which means all our meetings have to be open to the public and they have to be in this lovely setting. So the opportunity for that back and forth that you seek can exist, but when you're a lot closer than this, those are left for the very de minimis issues that obviously administration and you can engage in and then eventually bring back by way of the agreement. I imagine, and obviously my role is somewhat distant at this particular point, but it sounds like there is movement in the right direction. I don't know if it makes sense, and this is entirely your decision.
I don't know the answer at this point either. But.
The decision that you would have to make as the applicant would be to either ask this body to postpone this one time so that you can make whatever amendment to it and bring it back at the next meeting, which again, don't quote me, but it sounds like that's probably what makes the most sense.
Sure.
Or ask them to make a determination, and they'll make a determination tonight. I think they're all ready, able, and willing.
No, I think a postponement that's what I would ask for of city council, to make those small changes. I guess before I go back to the drawing board again, I'd like to get some clarity on the parking, right? Is it the council's, are they in favor of the more one beds and less efficiencies, or do they want the efficiencies back and then parking to meet code? I mean, because we'll get rid of a few units, but again, I still don't know if it'll be 5 units to make up those efficiencies to 1. It might be 3 units or 4 on the front. So would like to kind of get council's idea on that before I go back to the drawing board.
I personally would hate to go backwards on the count of efficiency versus 1 bedroom. I think that was a great acknowledgement of what we thought would be appropriate for our community by you making that change, and I would hate to lose ground with that. I mean, you're winning me over, man, so.
Yes.
So for conversation's sake and for progress, hopefully, I just want to, what I'm hearing from the dais is it wasn't substantive change. There wasn't substantive change. What I'm hearing in conversation now from Michael is some simple changes. Now, when we come back and when everyone's re-energized, is it going to be, this isn't substantive enough? So I want to, that was what everyone started out with, was what you came back with is not substantive change from what we asked for. And I'm not sure if through meeting fatigue.
I guess we'd have to see.
worn down.
I don't know, right? I mean, it's in the right direction, but to what extent, I'm hearing some positive things, right? But you still have to see it. So,
Right.
and I don't want to have it right now because I don't know, I mean, I'm speaking for myself, but as it is right now, I wouldn't approve it. So I'm giving, for me, I'm saying, let's have some more conversation through a postponement and see what comes back. If it, I have right to reserve the right to say no, right? So, but I'd like to see it.
So a good way to sort of assess the probability of what you bring back to us being accepted is perhaps for you to reiterate to us what you hear us saying and what changes we're expecting. And then we can confirm that you're hearing the right thing so that you come back with the right sort of proposal.
Understood.
So why don't you do that?
So what I've heard from the body today is that we need a few less units. That's definitely number 1 on the list. Adding, whether it's retail or activation space, and it may be is that a small enough thing to discuss at the next, well, if we have it just kind of as activation space, right? Right, so adding more activation space from Bowers towards Lincoln to kind of blend with that downtown over there in the city. I would propose leaving the building size from a footprint and site plan the same as is, and hopefully that reduces parking as well.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know until we do the numbers and do it. I mean, because of that 5-space variance, it may be a 1-space or a 2-space. I don't know the answer until Jason kind of sticks it in the sheets.
Yeah, I'd have to see it, right? Because I get it that you don't want to change the footprint, and I'm not necessarily ruling that out in the future. So just be prepared for that. I'd like to see what you have.
Sure.
Right. So again, I think the back and forth per se here, I think has been a good dialogue, constructive, and we're moving in the right direction. But again, I'd have to see it.
Understood. Anything else that's on anybody's mind before we go back to the drawing board to try to?
I think it would be safe to say we're not willing to cave too much on parking, so do your best. Right, and I don't mean that disrespectful, I just mean, seriously, come back with something good, because the parking concerns we had aren't changing because you're going to be great and come up with something to fix something else, right? It's still going to be something that's important to us to maintain.
So does that mean we will not be able to get a first floor waiver of parking like the other retail in the city center? Because everybody else in the city center doesn't have their own lots, right? Everybody has just their building with no parking technically attached to it, right? So if we do add retail, will the city be willing to entertain a retail waiver? Because I don't know what the parking requirement is for a coffee shop or retailer.
At this point, let's see it.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
I can't. Yeah, I can't. I hear what the mayor is indicating.
Sure.
again, I keep thinking about the density. I keep hearing, though, from Chamber of Commerce and DDA as far as what their comments were. Let's see.
Understood.
I'd love to see you go from 60 to 50 or something else to really really address that. I don't think you're going to, but
Yeah.
I really think that would help. I think that would help many of us.
I
in our
guess the
thoughts on
concern is,
that.
can that be done without reducing the footprint and thus putting it back in planning commissions? So
That's something we'll have to look at as well.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that.
reduce it. I guess the issue of having permit parking as opposed to open parking, if you could put that down as one of your premises too, I think is very important.
No problem.
If you're going to have this density, you need to send a signal to all your tenants
Correct.
that don't invite 10 friends over, for a party.
Understood.
Right now, comparing it to Clawson, man, that's a totally different demographic. Right now, your business model seems to be premised on upscale young people, they're single, they don't have much of a social life. So you got to
I
protect.
don't know about that.
Well, right now, that's.
So that is a picture you're painting. That's not the reality, but it's a picture.
It seems like that's your premise, and that it may work out, it may not. We have to protect against all possibilities.
Understood.
We want social people, because social people go to our businesses. We want them to go to our businesses.
They will be there.
It'll
I
be on the
promise.
application.
I promise you they'll be there.
Yes, sir.
Mayor, I was just wondering if we could have a little discussion for what exactly activation of the space entails, so everyone has that understanding. So is that retail, or is that reutilizing that space for your tenants, or is it either or?
I would prefer it to be either or, and then we could work that out with the city. Because again, I don't know, if that is retail, we will run into a parking issue. Even if it's 50 units, it'll run into, if you have a 3,000 square foot retail, it's going to cause a parking issue. And so if that's activation space for the tenants, whether it's a gym, a movie theater, or something else in that realm, right? The issue with that, right, realistically from a city perspective, is it doesn't create business, it doesn't create activity on the street either, right? So activation space is great, but usually you don't use activation space for that liner, right? I mean, it looks nice when you walk by, but it's not creating more traffic and more retail either, right? So you would, I would like to have that open-ended, and I don't know where the city would be on that, but I would like to explore both options and go from there.
I'll see what comes up. Yep.
Any other questions, concerns? You feel good about where you're standing today?
So we had a motion, but we were postponing.
So,
Is that the-
so do we, whoever made the motion, just withdraw it, or do we amend the motion?
Just withdraw it.
Either way, withdraw it, though, that's probably the easiest.
Someone else can make the motion to withdraw it.
Well, you
I
made the
will not.
motion, so you could,
No, I'm good.
okay, so I move that the previous, or that the motion be amended to postpone the whatever it is, the acceptance of the PUD, that we postpone the consideration of the PUD letter.
Madam Mayor, I believe that a motion postponed must have a definite time.
We postpone to the next city council meeting, because that's what you thought you guys could meet, right?
I don't know
Soon,
what day that is, and I have to make sure Jason can
December.
do it. I don't think December 17th will.
Okay, so if
Most
we need
likely
a
be
specific date, then,
It has to be a specific date?
I don't think, does it have, postponement at their discretion, as the applicant, they have the discretion
But the
when they
motion
came
to
here.
postpone pursuant to the rules does have to be definitive with respect to their request.
so can I say
To the
no
January.
no greater
Oh,
than
that's fine.
90 days?
That's good on our end. We'll come back before that.
That's my
I'm
motion.
Trying to get it done as soon as possible to get there, so.
The motion needs a second.
Thank you.
Support.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, roll call, please, Michelle.
Mayor Pro Tem Moffett,
Yes.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson,
Yes.
Councilmember Binkowski,
No.
Mayor Milan.
Yes. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you
I
for your
feel
guys'
good
time
about
as well.
what happened here. We look forward to seeing what you'll bring back to us. Thanks for thinking on your feet. Good job on that one. So we will see them in the near future to bring this topic up again, and we will move on to item number 10, which is unfinished business. Do we have any unfinished business? No, then we'll move on to number 11, which is public comment for items not on the agenda. If you're here and you'd like to speak to anything that's not on our agenda, we welcome you.
Not on the agenda.
Not on the agenda.
I just want to compliment the city administration and all of the team. These last few days have been remarkable. Pulse came in and everybody was working together. I could not believe it. All these hands from different areas were putting everything together and getting it out. It all went out. And the same thing happened tonight. Hunter came and they decorated the tables for us. And they did other things, and we've been in collaboration with the Clawson Flats and the Fall Fest. And I just can't say enough, whether it be the DPW or anything. I know all of you really believe that you have good staff. You have excellent staff. I was a CEO before, and I can see good people. And I'll tell you, you have the best people here in every department and every facet. And I just want to say congratulations, and a special congratulations to Brandon. He did an excellent job with the Pulse. A lot of people, with everything going on, were lackadaisical with other things, and they didn't get it out to him. He still reminded people, and he got it done. So kudos, you've got a great staff, and I want to thank all of you for supporting them.
Thank you. That's nice. We do have a great staff.
I'm just going to pop one short comment in here. Joe Tangari, Giffords Webster, city planner. It came up during the discussion, the comments that we heard about Lincoln and traffic problems on Lincoln. That is on the Planning Commission's radar. We actually have a draft master plan update, and Lincoln is identified specifically as a street that we are going to be looking at for, potential traffic calming. And that's partly because of the concerns that we've heard there, but we've identified a few other streets as well that have through traffic concerns. And we've come up with some strategies for potentially addressing those in the master plan update. So I just wanted to make that known before you get a chance to see the draft.
Thank you.
Sure.
Appreciate that. Anybody else? Okay, we'll close public comments and we'll move on to our city clerk's report. Michelle?
I'll be short with my report tonight. I have just wanted to bring it to the council's that we're working on the Class C liquor license renewals right now currently. I plan to have a report to you, but we're still waiting on a couple of them. So I'm hoping by the next city council meeting to have the reports of all the departments on our Class C liquor license renewals. We have 20 Class C liquor licenses currently, and the public hearing would have to be set. If for some reason we want to, if someone's not, getting done the things that they need to do. And that's the report I want to have to you. So you'll be able to review that. We'll decide if we need to have that public hearing or where we're going to be, before January. Typically, we have that hearing in January. I don't think there's a set date for that public hearing, but we want to make sure that we have it soon enough because the licenses renew in April, with the state. It really is just a way for us to get in and inspect these businesses, make sure they're up to code, make sure that they're paying their water bills and their tax bills and those kind of things. So that's what we're working on right now and trying to get all that pulled together. And there's just a couple pieces missing. We still have 10 businesses that have not applied yet. And we're working on that as well, trying to remind them to come in and pay. So half of them have not even paid their fee and applied for the Class C liquor license. So I don't know if it's just the busyness of the day. However, we'll do our best to get notice out to them again. And hopefully I'll have a more detailed report for you next council meeting so that you'll know who and which businesses we need to, address. So that's all I have tonight.
Thank you. Our city attorney's report, Mr. Newshy.
Good evening again, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Also, very briefly, I had to arrest an issue from administration. There was a question asked earlier about the status of any potential redevelopment of the former Pizza Hut site. We cannot comment too broadly on account of prosecution of a civil nature that there's currently pending in our district court. It concerns the foundation slab removal on the site. What I can tell you is that I've had a very positive conversation with the attorney for the owners of the building, and we do believe there's a potential resolution coming with respect to the slab and the site as is. And pending my future conversations, I will, of course, bring them before you for your consideration at that time. Otherwise, I have nothing additional. Happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions? Thank you very much. Thanks for that update. City manager's report, Mr. Raker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Did you have a question? Hang on,
Sorry, I just thought of one after, I apologize. The whole marijuana ordinance or charter amendment thing, the lawsuits regarding that, any update with that?
Tomorrow, we have a motion. It's scheduled that filed for the writ based on the, it's a purely legal issue, obviously. The Jars Cannabis, the plaintiff in that case, has filed a motion to ask the judge to issue a writ of mandamus, which for all intents and purposes would prevent the charter from taking effect if it were to be granted. The motion is scheduled for tomorrow at 10:15, I believe, in front of Judge Grant in the Oakland Circuit. I'll let you know as soon as I emerge from that motion. I'll send all of you an email, and obviously we'll update at the next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, fortuitous timing for the question.
Thank you. Mr. Raker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Finance Director Mark Pollack and I are meeting with PFM tomorrow to establish a rough timeline for our infrastructure improvement bond sale. We are still forecasting the sale for late winter, early spring, in anticipation of capitalizing on the 2025 construction season. Pending the findings from the CCTV and cleaning of the sewer system citywide, we intend to start construction on Elmwood from Crooks to Selfridge as early as possible in the construction season. CCTV televising and cleaning should begin next week, the second week of December, and their crews can work continuously as long as the temperature remains above 18 degrees. Now that the winter edition of the Clawson Pulse is on the street and online, the administration will focus on transforming the infrastructure section of the website to provide updates and forecasts on infrastructure improvement for continued public awareness and access to information. As a reminder, leaf season continues through this Thursday, December 5th, and yard waste will stop picking up for the winter on Wednesday, December 11th. Goodfellows paper sale has been moved to this coming Saturday, the 7th, from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. And pending any questions, that's my report.
Did you say Saturday?
Yes.
So they moved it from Sunday to Saturday?
Yes, that's what they provided me.
Okay. I was just doing a clarification, because I remember we talked about, oh, it's on Sunday, it's always on Saturday. So that's good. Okay. Anything else? Is that it?
No, ma'am.
Okay. City council
You
comment?
may have a question. So on my way home, there were some construction cones that were being put up on Main Street from Chippewa South. Is there anything we need to be aware of?
I can't say for certain. I know that the CDBG resolved in that area. It could be related to that, but we can touch base with the DPW tomorrow.
I was going to say, it can't be another road diet. There I have 3 already.
No.
Okay.
And if it was, it would have come before this body.
Okay. Thank you.
City council comments, Councilmember Minkowski.
Nothing from me.
Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Moffitt.
I got nothing.
Councilmember Anderson.
No comment.
And Councilmember Shepherd.
It's really good to see Councilman Anderson here.
It is.
Welcome back.
I would like to remind everyone that tomorrow there is our tree lighting ceremony. Starts at 6:30 at the library. And if you would like to make an ornament for a bird to go on the trees at the library, winter fuel for the birds, you can go to the library prior to that. I'm not sure the time, 5 or 5:30, but dress warm, get your stuff out. We're going to welcome Santa Claus, and hopefully it won't be snowing or raining or anything. And We also have a DDA workshop tomorrow at 8 a.m. So if you'd like to see what plans and participate in some conversation about our DDA, we'll be in this room. Show up. Other than that, thank you everyone for a really productive evening. And would someone like to make a motion for dismissal?
I move we adjourn.
Support.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Anderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Binkowski?
Yes.
Mayor Milan?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Moffett?
Yes.
Councilmember Shepherd?
Yes.
Thank you and good evening. Meeting adjourned.
That's all you get for call.
That's all right. Did you enjoy your break?
By the way,
Nice.